The package arrived on a Tuesday morning with no return address, no company logo, and no name printed anywhere except mine. Nora Whitmore. The letters had been written with a black marker in careful block capitals. Inside the padded envelope was a single brass house key. At first, I assumed someone had found it on the sidewalk and mailed it back. Then I noticed the small crescent-shaped scratch near the top. I looked down at the key in my own hand. The scratch was in exactly the same place. I carried the key to the front door, slid it into the lock, and turned it. The deadbolt opened without resistance. Someone had made a copy of my house key. I had never given one to anyone. Under the key was a folded piece of paper containing only 2 sentences. They copied it before they asked you to leave. Check the smoke detector in David's office before Friday. I read the note 3 times. David had been my husband. He had been dead for 14 months. And the only person who had recently asked me to leave my house was my older sister, Rachel. She called it a vacation. 3 weeks in her guest bedroom while she arranged some repairs for me. I had nearly agreed. Standing beside my open front door with the copied key in my palm, I realized that someone had not been trying to help me leave. They had been waiting for the house to be empty. My name is Nora Whitmore. I was 63 years old when that package appeared on my porch. I had lived in that house outside Tacoma, Washington, for almost 30 years. It was a modest 2-story home with pale gray siding, a narrow porch, and a backyard David had treated like a private botanical garden. He had planted every maple, trimmed every hedge, and spent entire Sunday afternoons trying to convince tomatoes to grow in weather that seemed personally opposed to them. The house was not impressive enough to attract strangers. It contained no famous paintings, antique jewelry, or hidden fortune. At least, that was what I believed. David and I had no children. For most of our marriage, that had made Rachel's family feel like my family too. Her son, Miles, had spent school vacations at our house. I attended every birthday dinner, graduation ceremony, and awkward teenage recital. When he got his first job, David helped him prepare for the interview. Rachel and I had not always been close. We were separated by 5 years and completely different personalities. Rachel entered every room as if she had been expected. She spoke quickly, made decisions confidently, and had an answer ready before most people finished asking a question. I was quieter. For 32 years, I worked in the county records office. I reviewed property filings, corrected indexing errors, and helped people locate documents they often did not understand. My job rewarded patience. It taught me that the most important fact in a room was rarely the loudest one. David understood that about me. Rachel did not. After David died from a heart attack at 66, Rachel became more involved in my life. At first, I was grateful. She brought groceries, arranged appointments, and called every evening to make sure I had eaten. During those first months, grief made even simple decisions feel exhausting. I would stand in the kitchen holding a plate and forget why I had taken it from the cabinet. Rachel filled the silence with instructions. You should sell this place. You should move closer to us. You should stop sleeping upstairs. You should let Miles handle the yard. I knew she could be controlling, but I believed her intentions were good. Then her questions changed. She stopped asking how I felt and started asking where David kept things. His old tax files, his external hard drives, his client notebooks, a blue document folder she claimed he had once shown her. David had worked as a forensic accountant. Most people imagined that meant he sat in a room surrounded by dramatic evidence, uncovering financial crimes every day. The truth was usually less exciting. He reviewed business records, traced missing payments, reconstructed incomplete accounts, and helped attorneys understand where money had gone. He was methodical, private, and nearly impossible to pressure. He also did occasional work for Rachel. She and her late husband had started a property maintenance company called North Point Residential Services. After her husband died, Rachel expanded the company with Miles. North Point managed repairs and maintenance for apartment buildings, assisted living facilities, and several nonprofit housing organizations. David had helped them organize their accounts during the expansion. I never asked for details. David respected client confidentiality, even with family. About 6 months before he died, I noticed tension between him and Rachel. She would call. He would walk into his office and close the door. Once, after a family dinner, I heard her say, "You are making this much larger than it is." David answered, "It is already larger than you think." When he returned to the kitchen, I asked what had happened. He kissed my forehead and told me it was a business disagreement. I trusted him enough not to push. After his death, I regretted that. The note in the package told me to check the smoke detector in David's office. I did not go upstairs immediately. I locked the front door, closed the curtains, and placed the copied key and note inside a glass food container, so I would not touch them again. Working around public records had taught me one useful habit. When something might become evidence, stop handling it. Then I called the non-emergency police number. The dispatcher asked whether anyone had entered my home, threatened me, or damaged the property. I told her I did not know. That answer sounded foolish even to me. An officer named Daniel Ruiz arrived 40 minutes later. He was younger than I expected, probably in his late 30s, with a calm voice and the patient expression of someone accustomed to frightened people giving him information in the wrong order. He photographed the envelope, key, and note. Then he asked who had access to my house. No one, I said. Family members? My sister visits. My nephew sometimes helps with the yard, but I never gave either of them a key. Could they have borrowed yours temporarily? I keep it in my purse. Is your purse ever unattended when they visit? That question stayed with me. Rachel had hosted a family dinner at my house 2 months earlier. She had insisted that I sit outside while she and Miles cleaned the kitchen. My purse had been hanging on the back of a dining chair. Officer Ruiz asked about the message. I explained who David was and why Rachel had asked me to stay with her. 2 weeks earlier, she had walked through my kitchen, tapping cabinet doors and pointing out problems I had lived with for years. The loose handle, the stain near the sink, the old electrical outlet beside the refrigerator. She announced that the house needed urgent repairs. Before I could object, she said North Point could coordinate everything. You shouldn't be around construction dust, she told me. Stay with me for a few weeks. Miles and I will manage the contractors. I said I would think about it. The next morning, she sent me a list of things to pack. Officer Ruiz listened without interrupting. Has any repair work actually been scheduled? Not that I know of. Any contractor estimates? No. Written agreements? No. He looked toward the staircase. Let's inspect the smoke detector. David's office had remained nearly unchanged since his death. His desk faced the window. His reading glasses still rested beside an empty ceramic mug. 2 shelves held accounting manuals that nobody but David would ever willingly read. The smoke detector was mounted above the door. Officer Ruiz used a chair to reach it. The cover came off easily. Behind the plastic casing, attached with a strip of black adhesive, was a camera no larger than a shirt button. A thin wire led to a small battery pack hidden above the molding. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The note was no longer a strange warning. Someone had entered my home. Someone had stood inside my dead husband's office and installed a camera. Officer Ruiz photographed the device before removing it. The camera contained a memory card. He explained that he could take the entire device as evidence, but accessing the files might require technical processing. He also told me that the copied key alone did not prove who had made it. The camera might. Do not contact anyone you suspect, he said. Change your locks today. Change your alarm code if you have one. And do not stay here alone tonight. I don't have an alarm. You do. Now. He was not joking. Before leaving, he gave me a case number and the name of a detective who would follow up. Then he repeated one instruction. Do not tell your sister what you found. That afternoon, a locksmith replaced both exterior locks. I paid extra for keys stamped with a restricted pattern that could not be casually duplicated at a hardware store. I also hired a security company to install door sensors, exterior cameras, and an alarm. For the first time since David's funeral, the house was filled with unfamiliar voices. Drills, footsteps, doors opening and closing. I watched every person who entered. That night, I stayed at a small hotel 15 minutes away. I told Rachel nothing. At 8:12, she called. You sound tired, she said. Are you all right? I didn't sleep well. That house is too much for you. I'm beginning to wonder whether you're right. The words came out calmly. Rachel's voice changed. Not much. Only enough for me to notice. You should come here tomorrow. We can start moving your things. I'm not ready tomorrow. Nora, this isn't about being ready. It's about being sensible. I need a few days. There was a pause. How many? The question felt less like concern and more like a deadline. I'll call you. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and stared at my phone. The note had said to check the smoke detector before Friday. It was Tuesday night. Whatever Rachel expected to happen, she expected it soon. The detective assigned to the case was named Lena Park. She called Wednesday morning and asked me to meet her at the station. The camera from David's office had captured 37 short recordings. Most showed an empty room. The device used motion activation, so it recorded only when something moved. The first useful file had been created 8 weeks earlier. On the screen, my office door opened. Miles entered. He glanced behind him, stepped onto a chair, and installed the camera. I gripped the edge of the table. He looked older than the boy I remembered, but in that moment, I could still see the 14-year-old who used to sleep on our living room floor during summer visits. He had installed surveillance equipment in my home. The next recording was made 3 days later. Rachel entered the office alone. She opened desk drawers, removed books from shelves, and searched behind framed photographs. There was no audio. I did not need it. Her movements were not those of someone checking on a grieving sister. She was searching for something. Another clip showed Rachel holding her phone toward the shelves, as if she were video calling someone. The next recording changed everything. It had been captured the previous Sunday, while I attended a neighbor's retirement lunch. Rachel and Miles entered together. This time, the camera's microphone had activated. The sound was faint but understandable. Rachel stood near David's desk. Miles said, "It isn't here." "It has to be," she answered. "You already checked the cabinets." He told Martin he kept backups at home. What if Nora found it? She doesn't know what she's looking at. Miles moved out of the camera frame. Then he asked, "What happens if the auditors get it first?" Rachel lowered her voice. "We don't let that happen." Miles said something we could not hear. Rachel responded more sharply. "She'll be out of the house by Friday. We will have time to open the wall properly." The recording ended. Detective Park replayed the last sentence. "Open the wall properly." "Do you know what wall she meant?" she asked. I did. David's office had one blue wall. The others were cream. He had painted it himself 6 years earlier, despite my repeated warnings that deep blue would make the room look smaller. At the time, he said every serious office needed one unreasonable decision. Detective Park asked whether we could search the room together. We returned to my house with another officer. Nothing about the blue wall looked unusual. A framed photograph hung behind David's desk. It showed the two of us standing near Mount Rainier on our 20th anniversary. When I removed it, I saw 4 tiny marks in the paint. Not nail holes. Corners. A rectangular section of drywall had been cut and repaired so carefully that the seams were nearly invisible. The officers photographed it. Then one of them used a small utility knife to open the panel. Inside the wall was a shallow metal box. It contained a blue folder, 3 flash drives, a spiral notebook, and a sealed letter with my name on it. My hands began to shake when I recognized David's handwriting. Detective Park allowed me to open the letter while she observed. "Nora, I hope you never need to read this. North Point's records contain transactions I cannot explain as mistakes. Payments were approved for work that was never completed. Several vendors appear to be controlled by people connected to Rachel and Miles. Some of the money originated from housing programs intended for elderly and disabled tenants. I confronted Rachel privately. She asked me to alter my findings and treat the discrepancies as bookkeeping errors. I refused. I have preserved copies of the relevant records. I also sent limited documentation to Martin Hale, with instructions to act if I become unable to finish the review. I do not believe Rachel will hurt you. I do believe she will use your trust in her to protect herself. If she begins asking about my files, contact Martin before giving her anything. Do not confront her alone. I am sorry I brought this near our home. I love you, David." I read the last 2 lines twice. Then I sat in his chair and cried. Not loudly. Grief did not arrive dramatically anymore. It came as pressure behind my ribs, as if part of me were trying to fold inward. David had known Rachel might search our home. He had known she might use me, and he had tried to leave protection behind without frightening me while he was alive. Detective Park asked who Martin Hale was. I remembered the name from David's professional contacts. He was an attorney who handled financial investigations and business disputes. I found his number in an old address book. When I called, his assistant transferred me immediately. Martin's first words were, "Are you safe?" He had been expecting my call for more than a year. David had contacted him 6 weeks before his death. The records in the wall were not the only copies. David had already provided Martin with encrypted data and a written summary of his concerns. However, the information had been incomplete. Without the final supporting documents, Martin could identify suspicious patterns, but could not prove who had authorized each transaction. The flash drives in my wall might contain those missing records. Martin had not contacted me after David's death because David had given precise instructions. He was to wait unless Rachel attempted to obtain the files, pressured me about the house, or became the subject of a formal audit. 2 of those conditions had now occurred. A nonprofit housing organization that contracted with Northpoint had begun reviewing irregular maintenance invoices. Rachel knew the review was happening. That explained the deadline. She did not want my house renovated. She wanted me gone long enough to tear open David's office wall. The next question was who had sent the key. It could not have been Rachel. The note had exposed her plan. Miles had installed the camera, but the recordings showed hesitation in his voice. He might have warned me after realizing how far his mother intended to go. Detective Park told me not to assume that reluctance meant innocence. Miles had entered my house without permission, installed surveillance equipment, and helped search David's office. Still, someone had mailed the copied key. The envelope's postal mark showed it had been processed in Olympia, almost 40 miles away. Miles lived in Tacoma. Rachel lived 12 minutes from me. Martin arranged for a digital specialist to examine the flash drives in coordination with Detective Park. The files contained invoice records, vendor registrations, emails, bank transfer summaries, and scanned approvals. David had organized everything by date. 3 vendors had charged Northpoint for major repair projects at assisted living properties. According to the invoices, roofs had been replaced, elevators repaired, and fire systems upgraded. But building records showed much of the work had never occurred. One vendor was registered to a former employee of Rachel's. Another used a mailing address connected to Miles. The third appeared independent until the investigators traced its payment account. The account belonged to a company controlled by Rachel through a nominee. Over 4 years, more than $600,000 had moved through those vendors. Not every payment was necessarily fraudulent. That would require a full investigation. But the records were serious enough for Martin to contact the organization conducting the audit. Detective Park also obtained legal authorization to examine the camera and related digital evidence more thoroughly. By Thursday afternoon, Rachel had called me 7 times. I answered the 8th call. "Nora, I'm worried about you." "I'm fine. You said you needed a few days. I've already cleared the guest room." "That was kind." "I'm coming tomorrow morning with Miles. We'll help you pack." "You don't need to do that." "You shouldn't be alone while the electrical work is happening." "No electrical work has been scheduled." Rachel hesitated. "Miles arranged it." "With which contractor?" "I don't have the name in front of me." "What work are they doing?" "Nora, why are you questioning every detail?" "Because my sister had copied my key." "Because my nephew had hidden a camera in my dead husband's office." "Because they planned to remove me from my home and cut open a wall before financial auditors found what David had hidden there." I said none of that. Instead, I answered, "Working in records made me particular about details." Her tone hardened. "Friday morning, 10 o'clock. Be ready." "I'll think about it." "You agreed." "No, Rachel. You decided." For the first time in months, I heard myself speak to her without apologizing. She ended the call. At 10:43 that night, my new security system sent an alert. Movement had been detected near the back door. I opened the camera feed. Miles stood beneath the porch light. He wore a dark jacket and baseball cap. His hands were empty. He looked at the camera, stepped closer, and pressed the doorbell. I called Detective Park before speaking through the intercom. "What do you want, Miles?" He flinched when he heard my voice. "Aunt Nora, I need to talk to you." "You can talk from there." "Not on this. You installed a camera in my home. I think we are past worrying about privacy." He looked toward the driveway. "I sent the package." Hearing the words did not bring relief. It made the situation more confusing. "Why?" "Because she was going to come tomorrow." "Your mother?" He nodded. "She said you would be at her house. She hired 2 men to remove part of the office wall and repair it before you got back." "Contractors?" "They work for Northpoint. They don't know the full story." "You made the key." His face tightened. "I made the impression. Mom told me you wanted a spare in case of an emergency." "And the camera?" "She said Uncle David had hidden company property. She wanted to know whether you found it." "You believed her?" "At first. Then you searched my house anyway." He lowered his eyes. "Yes." Detective Park arrived with another officer before I opened the door. Miles agreed to speak with them. Inside my kitchen, he looked less like an intruder and more like a frightened man who had made a series of cowardly decisions and finally realized they had formed a crime. He explained that Rachel had become desperate after learning about the audit. She told him David had stolen North Point records and intended to destroy the company. Miles believed retrieving the files would protect employees from losing their jobs. Then he saw the real invoices. Several false vendors had been used to pay personal debts, purchase investment property, and cover losses from a failed development project. Miles claimed he had not created the scheme, but he had signed some approvals without asking questions. That gave Rachel leverage over him. When he threatened to stop helping, she reminded him that his name appeared on the documents. He mailed the key because he was afraid to contact me directly. "Why Olympia?" Detective Park asked. "I drove there for a work inspection. I thought Mom might recognize the local postal mark." "And the note?" I didn't know how much to say. I thought if Aunt Nora found the camera, she would call the police. "You could have called us yourself." "I know." His voice broke on the final word. I felt something complicated watching him. Anger, certainly. But beneath it was grief for the person I thought he had been. Miles had not protected me because he was brave. He had protected himself because Rachel's plan was becoming dangerous. The warning mattered. It did not erase what he had done. Detective Park asked Miles to describe the plan for Friday. Rachel intended to arrive at my house at 10. She expected me to leave with her. Miles and 2 North Point workers would enter later using the copied key. They would remove the hidden box, repair the wall, and claim the work had been part of an electrical safety inspection. Rachel believed I would never notice. When Miles told her he had misplaced the copied key, she became furious. She ordered another copy. That was when Miles came to my house. The locks had already been changed, but Rachel did not know that. Detective Park did not propose a dramatic ambush. Real investigations are rarely arranged for emotional satisfaction. She told me the priority was safety and evidence preservation. Rachel would be informed that she did not have permission to enter my property. The workers would be contacted and warned not to perform unauthorized work. The financial evidence would be handled separately by the appropriate investigators. I understood. Still, a part of me wanted Rachel to stand inside my kitchen and explain herself. Not to the police. Not to lawyers. To me. Martin advised against a private confrontation. Instead, he proposed a controlled meeting at his office the following week. Rachel would be invited to discuss documents related to David's estate and North Point. Detective Park approved as long as I did not reveal confidential details about the investigation. Miles agreed to cooperate through his own attorney. By Friday morning, the box from the wall was no longer in my house. Neither were the flash drives. At 9:57, a black North Point van turned onto my street. It slowed near the house, then continued past. My camera recorded the driver speaking on his phone. A few minutes later, Rachel called. I let it ring. She called again. Then she sent a message. "We are outside. Open the door." I looked through the front window. Rachel's car was parked at the curb. She walked up the path carrying 2 empty suitcases. She tried the old copied key. It entered the lock but would not turn. For several seconds, she stood completely still. Then she tried again. Harder. The new deadbolt did not move. My phone rang. I answered from inside the house. "Your key isn't working?" I asked. Silence. Then, "What did you say?" "The key you were never supposed to have." Her expression changed. I could see it through the glass panel beside the door. The concern disappeared first, then the confidence. "Nora, open the door." "No. We need to talk." "We will. At Martin Hale's office on Tuesday." She stepped back. The name frightened her more than the changed lock. "How do you know Martin?" "David introduced us." That was not entirely true, but it was close enough. Her voice became quiet. "What did you find?" There it was. Not, "What are you talking about?" Not, "Why would I have a key?" "What did you find?" "I found enough to understand why you needed me gone." "Nora, this is not what you think. You entered my home. I was trying to protect the company. You searched David's office. He took records that belonged to us. You installed a camera." That was Miles. The speed with which she blamed her own son told me more about her than any accounting record. I looked at the woman standing on my porch. My sister. The person who brought me soup after David died. The person who sat beside me during funeral arrangements. The person who had held my hand while quietly calculating how easily she could remove me from my home. "You need to leave," I said. "Open this door. The police have already documented the key, the camera, and the recordings." Rachel looked toward the security camera above the porch. For the first time, she seemed to understand that our conversation was being recorded too. She lowered her voice. "You are making a mistake." "No. My mistake was believing that help never comes with an agenda." Her face tightened. "After everything I have done for you?" That question might once have weakened me. Grief had made me easy to direct because I was afraid that setting boundaries would leave me completely alone. But standing behind the locked door, I realized something. Rachel had not been preventing my loneliness. She had been using it. "Leave my property," I said. She dropped the suitcases beside the porch steps and walked back to her car. The North Point van followed her away. Tuesday's meeting took place in a conference room at Martin Hale's office. Rachel arrived with an attorney. I sat beside Martin. Detective Park was not present. The meeting concerned estate documents, property removed from my home, and the preservation of evidence. The criminal and financial investigations were proceeding through their own channels. Rachel looked composed again. She wore a navy suit and carried a leather folder. She began by describing everything as a misunderstanding. David had retained company records without authorization. She had only wanted to recover North Point property. The camera had been installed to determine whether anyone else entered the office. The copied key had been created for my safety. The proposed repairs were real. Every violation had an explanation. Martin listened without reacting. Then he placed a copy of David's letter on the table. Rachel stopped talking. Martin explained that David had been authorized to review North Point's financial records. His engagement documents allowed him to retain working copies connected to his analysis. More importantly, the files hidden in my wall were not the only copies.